London, 1852. The rain battered against the windows of Kendall House like an unwelcome suitor, persistent and cold. Nora Kendall sat at her father's bedside, watching the shallow rise and fall of his chest beneath the coverlet. The physician had departed an hour prior, his grim expression confirming what she had feared for weeks. Her father would not see another season. "You must promise me, Nora," her father whispered, his once commanding voice now threadbare with illness. "Promise me you'll accept Grantham's proposal." She turned away, unable to bear the desperate hope in his fading eyes. "Father, please. Lord Grantham's son is a stranger to me, and the stories they tell of him. Viscount Adrian Grantham may be feared by society, but his father is the only man who can save our family from ruin." Her father's hand trembled as he reached for hers. "You know the debts I leave behind. Without this match, you'll have nothing. No home, no prospects, no protection." Nora swallowed the bitter truth that had haunted her since her 18th birthday. A woman's security depended entirely on advantageous marriage. Love was a luxury reserved for those with fortune or extraordinary beauty. She possessed neither. "They call him that scarred Viscount," she whispered, voicing the gossip that had circulated through London's drawing rooms. "They say he returned from the Crimea a changed man, cold, disfigured, dangerous." "Rumors," her father rasped. "People fear what they don't understand. His father assures me the Viscount simply values his privacy." Nora stared at the raindrops tracing patterns on the window, each one a tear she could not allow herself to shed. At 23, with no dowry and a disgraced family name, she had long resigned herself to spinsterhood. Perhaps teaching at a ladies' seminary, or serving as companion to some elderly relation. Never this, marriage to a man whispered about in hushed, frightened tones. "I only ask because I must, my darling girl," her father continued. "Lord Grantham has agreed to settle all our debts and provide you a comfortable allowance. In return, his son gains the respectability of marriage to a woman of good family, if diminished circumstances. A business arrangement, then. Not a love match." Nora had always known love was not for someone like her, the plain, sensible daughter of a gambler who had squandered the family fortune. Her mother, gone these 10 years, had instilled in her a practical nature. A woman must secure her future, she had said. Beauty fades, but intelligence and resilience endure. "I promise," Nora finally whispered, the words tasting of surrender. Her father died 3 days later. The announcement in the Times was brief and formal: "A marriage has been arranged between Viscount Adrian Grantham, son of the Earl of Wentworth, and Miss Nora Kendall, daughter of the late Colonel James Kendall." No mention of affection. No romantic sentiments. A transaction recorded for society's consumption. Nora stood in the Earl of Wentworth's imposing study, her mourning clothes the only splash of darkness in a room dominated by gleaming mahogany and crimson upholstery. The Earl himself, a tall, distinguished gentleman with silver-threaded hair, appraised her with cool detachment. "My son has agreed to the match," he said without preamble. "He understands his responsibilities to our family name. The wedding will take place in 1 month, a quiet ceremony, given your mourning period." Nora nodded, her gloved hands clasped tightly before her. "May I inquire when I might meet Viscount Grantham? We are to be married, yet I've never once been in his company." Something like discomfort crossed the Earl's features. "Adrian is particular about his privacy. He spends most of his time at Thornfield Abbey, our estate in Derbyshire. You'll meet him on your wedding day." "My lord, surely that's most unusual. My son was gravely injured in the war, Miss Kendall. His experiences have left him changed. He avoids society whenever possible. I trust you understand." The implication was clear, understanding was required, not offered. Nora felt a chill creep up her spine. What manner of man would agree to marry a woman he had never met, yet refused to see her before their wedding? "The arrangements have been made," the Earl continued, sliding a document across his desk. "Your father's debts have been settled. This paper confirms your quarterly allowance, which is quite generous. The marriage will proceed as planned." As she left Wentworth House, Nora caught the pitying glances of the servants. One elderly maid crossed herself when she thought Nora couldn't see. The whispers followed her into the carriage, "Poor girl. Married to the beast of Thornfield." The wedding was indeed a quiet affair, no celebration, merely a legal ceremony with the Earl and his solicitor as witnesses. The church was cold, the February air seeping through stone walls that had witnessed countless unions more joyful than this. When the Viscount finally appeared, Nora nearly gasped aloud. Adrian Grantham moved with a slight limp, leaning heavily on a polished walking stick. He was tall, taller than she had imagined, and broader of shoulder than most gentlemen of her acquaintance. His dark hair, longer than fashion dictated, partially obscured the right side of his face, where a scar ran from temple to jaw. But it was his eyes that held her transfixed, grey as storm clouds, watchful, wary, revealing nothing of the man behind them. Throughout the ceremony, he spoke only when required, his deep voice startling her each time. He did not look at her directly, keeping his scarred side angled away. When the time came to exchange rings, his fingers brushed against hers, warm and surprisingly gentle, causing her to tremble. Adrian, take thee, Nora." His words were measured, formal. No emotion colored his tone. Afterward, they traveled in silence to Thornfield Abbey, the Viscount's ancestral home. The imposing stone structure loomed against the darkening sky, its Gothic towers and weathered gargoyles more fortress than residence. "Welcome to Thornfield," he said as he helped her from the carriage, his touch fleeting against her gloved hand. The housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, greeted them with a respectful curtsy, though Nora noticed how carefully the woman avoided looking directly at her master's face. "Your chambers have been prepared, my lady," the housekeeper said, the new title falling awkwardly on Nora's ears. "Lady Grantham will take the blue suite," the Viscount instructed, removing his gloves with practiced movements. "Ensure she has everything she requires." Nora stiffened. "The blue suite? I had understood we would share chambers, my lord." The words cost her dearly, her cheeks burning with mortification. His expression remained impassive, though his knuckles whitened around his walking stick. "We have fulfilled the legal requirements of marriage, madam. I see no reason to extend the arrangement beyond what is necessary." He turned to the housekeeper. "Show her ladyship to her rooms." As Nora followed the housekeeper up the grand staircase, her mind reeled with confusion. She had prepared herself for many unpleasantries in this marriage of convenience, including an unwelcome physical union, but not this cold dismissal. Days passed in the vast, echoing halls of Thornfield Abbey. Nora rarely saw her husband, who spent his mornings in the library and his afternoons riding alone across the wild moors surrounding the estate. They dined together in silence each evening, the enormous oak table stretching between them like a chasm. "Do you always ride alone, my lord?" she ventured one evening, desperate to break the suffocating quiet. He looked up from his plate, surprise momentarily softening his severe expression. "I find solitude preferable to company, Lady Grantham." "Even your wife's company?" The question escaped before she could reconsider its wisdom. His fork paused midway to his mouth. "Our arrangement does not require companionship, merely cohabitation. I believe the terms were clear." "Terms?" Nora placed her napkin beside her barely touched meal. "Is that how you view our marriage? A contract with terms. Is it not?" For the first time, he held her gaze directly. Your father owed substantial debts. My father required me to marry. Neither of us entered this union seeking affection. The truth of his words stung more than they should have. Yet we might still establish some manner of friendship, might we not? We shall spend many years under the same roof. Something unreadable flickered across his face. I am not a man who invites or expects friendship, Lady Grantham. You would do well to occupy yourself with household matters and social calls. The vicar's wife would welcome your acquaintance, I'm sure. And if I wish to know my husband instead? Nora surprised herself with her boldness. His expression hardened. There is nothing to know that would bring you comfort. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Good evening, madam. That night, as rain lashed against her window, Nora wondered what demons haunted the Viscount. The servants whispered when they thought she couldn't hear, tales of nightmares that woke the household, of rage and sorrow no physician could cure. She had married a stranger whose wounds ran deeper than the scar on his face. One morning, Nora wandered into the library, seeking diversion from her solitude. She found her husband there, unexpectedly, bent over an architectural drawing. Forgive me, she said, backing toward the door. I didn't realize you were here. You may stay, he said without looking up. The library belongs to the mistress of Thornfield as much as its master. Nora hesitated, then moved to the shelves, selecting a volume of poetry. They sat in surprisingly comfortable silence until she noticed his hand trembling as he attempted to make a precise mark on his drawing. May I help? She asked softly. He looked up sharply. I don't require assistance. Perhaps not, but you might welcome it nonetheless. She approached slowly, as one might a wounded animal. I've some skill with drawing. My governess insisted upon it. For a long moment, he stared at her, conflict evident in his eyes. Then, wordlessly, he shifted to make room beside him at the desk. The plans revealed designs for a new glasshouse on the southern grounds. Nora studied the intricate drawings with genuine interest. These are quite remarkable. Did you design them yourself? He nodded, seeming almost embarrassed by her praise. Architecture was a passion of mine. Before the war, she ventured gently. His jaw tightened, but he did not rebuke her. Yes. Nora carefully traced a line that had been smudged. The symmetry here is elegant. You have a true gift. The tremors make precision difficult now. His voice was low, tinged with frustration. Another souvenir from Sevastopol. Perhaps we might work together, she suggested, heart racing at her own daring. You could direct, and I could translate your vision onto paper. He studied her face, searching for mockery or pity. Finding neither, he slowly nodded. An unconventional arrangement. We seem destined for those, my lord. The ghost of a smile touched her lips. For the first time, something like warmth entered his grey eyes. Adrian, he said quietly. If we are to collaborate, you might as well use my given name. The glass house project became their shared endeavor. Each morning, they would meet in the library to refine the designs. Adrian's knowledge of engineering principles was extensive, his eye for beauty undimmed by his experiences. Nora's steady hand brought his ideas to life on paper. The eastern wall should curve here, he instructed one day, leaning close to indicate the change. His proximity sent an unexpected shiver through her. Like this? She adjusted the line, acutely aware of his breath warming her cheek. Perfect. His hand brushed hers as he took the pencil to make a small mark. You have an intuitive understanding of structure. I merely follow your guidance, she replied, oddly breathless. The vision is entirely yours. He shook his head. You're too modest. These improvements to the ventilation system were your suggestion. It was the first genuine compliment he had paid her. Nora felt a warm glow of pride that had nothing to do with wifely duty or social obligation. We make a good team, it seems. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or realization. Yes, he said softly. We do. When construction began on the glass house, they supervised together. Nora noticed how Adrian's demeanor changed when engaged in work he loved. His movements became more fluid, his speech less guarded. Occasionally, she caught glimpses of the man he might have been before war had marked him, body and soul. One afternoon, as they examined the newly installed iron framework, a sudden storm erupted. Thunder cracked overhead, and Adrian's entire body went rigid, his face draining of color. Adrian? Nora touched his arm, concerned by his fixed stare and shallow breathing. He didn't seem to hear her, his eyes seeing something far beyond the Derbyshire countryside. His hands clenched, unclenched. Adrian, she repeated, more firmly this time, placing her hand against his cheek. You're at Thornfield. You're safe. The touch seemed to penetrate his fugue state. His eyes focused on her face, confusion giving way to recognition, then shame. He stepped back abruptly. Forgive me, he said, his voice rough. The thunder, sometimes it takes me back. There's nothing to forgive. Nora offered her arm. Shall we return to the house? I believe Mrs. Patterson mentioned chocolate tarts for tea today. He hesitated, then accepted her arm, his touch careful, as though she might shatter, or perhaps he might. They walked in silence through the rain, but it was not the cold silence of strangers. Something had changed between them. That evening, he joined her in the drawing room after dinner, rather than retreating to his study as usual. He brought a book but didn't open it, instead watching her embroider with quiet attention. May I ask you something, she ventured, setting aside her needlework. He nodded, wariness returning to his posture. What happened in Crimean? Not the official account, but to you. She met his gaze steadily. I am your wife, Adrian. I would know the man I married. For a long moment, she thought he would refuse. Then he set down his book and stared into the fire. We were pinned down outside Sevastopol, he began, his voice distant. Artillery bombardment. A shell struck nearby. I remember the heat, the force of it throwing me against stone. When I woke, most of my company was dead. My closest friend died in my arms. Nora remained silent, allowing him space to continue or stop as he chose. The physical wounds healed, eventually, he said, gesturing vaguely toward his scarred face. The others. He shook his head. I returned to London, tried to resume my life, but everything had changed. Or perhaps I had. The crowds, the noise, the endless chatter about trivial matters, I couldn't bear it. My father called me mad. Society called me worse. His hand tightened on the armrest. I retreated here, where at least the solitude was honest. Until your father insisted you marry, Nora supplied softly. A humorless smile touched his lips. Yes. He threatened to cut off my allowance entirely if I didn't do my duty and secure the succession. When he suggested an arrangement with your father, it seemed tolerable. A quiet woman from a good family, desperate enough not to be repulsed by my scars or my temperament. The assessment stung, though Nora knew it was not meant cruelly, merely his perception of their situation. And now? Do you find our arrangement tolerable still?" Adrian turned to her, studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I find it unexpectedly comfortable." He seemed surprised by his own admission. "You don't demand constant conversation or social engagements. You don't flinch from my appearance. And you understand the glasshouse designs without explanation." It wasn't a declaration of affection, yet Nora felt warmed by his words. "I find it comfortable as well," she admitted. "Though I would not object to knowing you better." Something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. "I'm not certain I remember how to be known. Perhaps we might learn together." She returned to her embroidery, allowing him time to consider her words. When she retired that night, he escorted her to her chamber door, a small courtesy he had never before extended. His hand brushed hers as he bid her good night, the touch lingering longer than necessary. Spring advanced, bringing life back to Thornfield's gardens and a gradual thawing of the walls between its master and mistress. They established routines: breakfast together in the morning room, work on the glass house until luncheon, then separate pursuits in the afternoon before reuniting for dinner. Adrian began sharing books he thought she might enjoy, carefully annotated in his precise handwriting. Nora introduced him to her favorite composers, playing the pianoforte while he listened, eyes closed, tension easing from his shoulders. The nightmares still came. Servants whispered of the master's shouted orders to phantom soldiers, his desperate pleas to save men long dead. Nora lay awake during these episodes, wondering if she should go to him, offer comfort. But the invisible boundary between their chambers remained uncrossed. One evening, a letter arrived bearing the Earl of Wentworth's seal. Adrian read it during dinner, his expression darkening with each line. "Troubling news?" Nora inquired when he set it aside. "My father intends to visit." His voice was tight with suppressed emotion. "Next week. With guests." Nora set down her fork. "I see. How long do we expect them?" "A fortnight, possibly longer. My father writes that Lady Harrington and her daughter will accompany him." Adrian's knuckles whitened around his glass. "Miss Harrington was once considered a potential match for me, before Crimean," Nora finished quietly. He nodded, jaw clenched. "My father clearly hopes to parade his success in seeing me wed and settled. A triumph of his will over my peculiarities, as he calls them." The bitterness in his voice made Nora's heart ache. "We shall receive them with all proper courtesy," she said firmly. "And show them that Thornfield's master and mistress require neither their approval nor their pity." Adrian looked at her with something like wonder. "You would stand with me in this?" "I am your wife," she replied simply. "Where else would I stand?" The Earl arrived with an entourage that transformed Thornfield's quiet halls into a circus of activity. Lady Harrington, a sharp-featured woman with calculating eyes, scrutinized every aspect of Thornfield's management, making pointed comments about the quaint arrangements Nora had implemented. Her daughter, Sophia Harrington, was a renowned beauty with golden curls and a musical laugh that seemed to follow Adrian through every room. She made no attempt to hide her continued interest in the Viscount, despite his married state. "We were practically betrothed before he went to war," Sophia confided to Nora over tea, her voice a theatrical whisper. "Papa had already discussed settlements with the Earl. Then poor Adrian returned so changed." She sighed dramatically. "Some of us might have remained loyal despite his afflictions, but the Earl thought it best to seek another arrangement." Nora maintained her composure with effort. "How fortunate, then, that circumstances aligned to bring us together. My husband and I are exceedingly well suited." Sophia's tinkling laugh held no warmth. "Oh, my dear Lady Grantham, you needn't pretend with me. Everyone knows the nature of your arrangement. Your father's gambling debts were quite the scandal." Heat rushed to Nora's cheeks, not from embarrassment but from anger. Before she could respond, Adrian's voice cut through the tension. "I believe you're discussing matters that don't concern you, Miss Harrington." He stood in the drawing-room doorway, his expression thunderous. "My wife deserves your respect, as does our marriage." Sophia flushed, attempting to recover with a coquettish smile. "Adrian, darling, we were merely reminiscing. Lady Grantham and I are becoming fast friends." "Indeed," Nora said coolly, rising to stand beside her husband. "Miss Harrington has been most illuminating about past arrangements." That evening, the Earl requested a private audience with his son. Nora waited in their shared sitting room, pretending to read while straining to hear the muffled voices from Adrian's study. When he finally emerged, his face was pale with suppressed rage. "My father believes our marriage is a mistake," he said without preamble. "He suggests an annulment might be arranged, as the union remains unconsummated." Nora felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her. "I see," she managed, her voice faint. "And what did you tell him?" Adrian ran a hand through his hair, disheveling the careful styling. "I told him our marriage is not his concern. That I had no interest in Miss Harrington before my departure for Crimea, and certainly none now." Relief flooded through her, followed by a strange disappointment. He had defended their arrangement, but not expressed any personal attachment to her. Why should that hurt? Their marriage was never meant to be more than convenience. "He believes you deserve better," Adrian continued, pacing before the fire. "A whole man, not someone damaged beyond repair." "Your father presumes to know what I deserve." Indignation overcame her caution. "Or what I might want." Adrian stopped, turning to look at her with surprise. "What do you want, Nora? Truly? You've made the best of an untenable situation, but surely you must sometimes regret being tied to this." He gestured to himself, to his scars, to all he believed made him unworthy. Nora crossed the room to stand before him, close enough to see the flecks of blue in his grey eyes. "What I want," she said softly, "is a husband who sees me as a partner, not an obligation. Who shares his thoughts and his burdens. Who trusts me enough to let me help carry them." Her hand rose, hesitantly, to touch the scar on his cheek. "I want you, Adrian. Not some imagined whole man who never experienced suffering." He stood utterly still beneath her touch, his breathing shallow. "Nora?" A knock at the door interrupted whatever he might have said. The butler announced dinner was served, and the moment shattered like glass. The Earl extended his stay, clearly hoping to drive a wedge between them. He arranged excursions that separated Adrian and Nora, scheduled intimate dinners that placed Sophia beside his son, and made pointed remarks about bloodlines and suitable matches. Through it all, Adrian remained steadfastly by Nora's side. If his father placed Sophia next to him at dinner, he would engage Nora in conversation across the table. When the Earl suggested a gentleman's shooting party, Adrian insisted Nora join them to sketch the landscape. They presented a united front, yet still maintained separate chambers. Each night, Adrian escorted Nora to her door, lingering longer each time, something unspoken hanging between them. One evening, the Earl hosted a small musical soiree, inviting neighbouring gentry to Thornfield. Sophia performed a sentimental ballad, her eyes fixed meaningfully on Adrian throughout. When she finished to enthusiastic applause, the Earl turned to Nora. "Perhaps Lady Grantham might favour us with a performance." His tone suggested he expected her to decline, reinforcing the notion that Adrian had married beneath his station. Nora rose gracefully, moving to the pianoforte despite her racing heart. She had played only for Adrian since coming to Thornfield, never for an audience. She selected a challenging piece by Chopin, one that required both technical skill and emotional depth. As she played, she poured every unspoken feeling into the music, her loneliness upon first arriving at Thornfield, her gradual understanding of the complex man she had married, her growing affection for him, and her fear that what they had built together might still be too fragile to withstand the Earl's interference. When the final notes faded, silence held the room in thrall before applause erupted. Nora looked up to find Adrian watching her with naked emotion, all his careful masks temporarily abandoned. "I had no idea Lady Grantham was so accomplished," Lady Harrington remarked, her surprise evident. "My wife possesses many talents," Adrian replied, not taking his eyes from Nora. "I discover new ones daily." The Earl frowned at this display of genuine admiration. "Sophia, dear, perhaps another song? Something livelier to raise our spirits." As the evening continued, Nora noticed the Earl drawing Adrian into increasingly heated conversations whenever she approached. After one such exchange, Adrian abruptly excused himself and limped from the room, his face tight with pain and anger. Concerned, Nora followed him to the library, where she found him staring into the unlit fireplace, a decanter of brandy open beside him. "What did he say to upset you so?" she asked, closing the door behind her. Adrian's laugh was harsh. "My father has decided to be direct. He offered to triple your settlement if we agreed to an annulment." The word struck like physical blows. "He believes I would accept money to set you free. He believes everyone has a price." Adrian turned to face her, anguish evident in his eyes. "Perhaps he's right. This isn't the marriage you deserved, Nora. No matter how we've tried to make it bearable." Bearable. The word tasted bitter on her tongue. "Is that all our life together has been to you? Something to be endured?" "No." He moved toward her, stopping just short of touching her. "These past months with you have been. I've felt more alive, more myself, than I have since before the war. But I've given you nothing of what a wife should expect from her husband." Understanding dawned. "If you refer to physical intimacy, I've never pressed, it's not just that." His voice dropped, raw with emotion. "I've kept you at arm's length because I feared. I feared you would come to care for me, and I would inevitably disappoint you. The nightmares, the memories, the days when I can barely face the world, they won't vanish, Nora. I will always be broken in ways no one can fix." "Did I ever ask you to be fixed?" she countered, stepping closer. "I don't want some idealized version of you. I want the man who designs glass houses and discusses philosophy and sometimes cannot bear the sound of thunder. I want my husband, exactly as he is." Adrian's hand trembled as he reached for her, cupping her cheek with exquisite gentleness. "I don't deserve you." "Perhaps not," she whispered, smiling through sudden tears. "But you have me nonetheless." His kiss was tentative at first, as though he expected her to pull away. When she responded, arms twining around his neck, his restraint crumbled. He gathered her against him, his embrace desperate and tender all at once. "I love you," he breathed against her lips. "God help me, I never meant to, but I do." Nora's heart soared at the words she had scarcely allowed herself to hope for. "And I love you. Not from duty or gratitude, but for the man you truly are." That night, the barrier between their chambers was finally breached. Their union was not the cold fulfillment of marital obligation, but the joining of two souls who had found in each other something neither had dared hope for: acceptance, understanding, and love that asked nothing but to be returned in kind. The Earl departed Thornfield Abbey the following week, his matchmaking schemes in ruins. Lady Harrington and her daughter left with him, Sophia's parting smile brittle with disappointment. "He'll try again," Adrian warned as they watched the carriages disappear down the drive. "My father doesn't surrender easily." "Neither do I," Nora replied, her hand warm in his. "Let him scheme. We know the truth of our marriage now." Spring gave way to summer, and the glass house neared completion. They spent mornings selecting exotic plants for its interior, afternoons riding together across the estate, and nights learning the contours of each other's bodies and souls. The nightmares still came, but now Adrian would wake to find Nora beside him, her presence anchoring him to the present. One evening, as they stood in the newly finished glass house, surrounded by the scent of jasmine and the soft bubble of the fountain they had designed together, Adrian took her hands in his. "When we married, I believed I was beyond happiness," he said softly. "That the best I could hope for was quiet routine and mutual tolerance. You've shown me how wrong I was." "As you have shown me that love isn't reserved for the fortunate few," she replied. "It can find us even in the most unlikely circumstances." Adrian drew her into his arms, his embrace no longer hesitant but confident, protective. "I can't promise there won't be difficult days ahead. The war will always be with me in some form." "And I will always be with you," Nora assured him. "In darkness and in light." Outside, rain began to fall, drumming against the glass roof. Adrian tensed momentarily at the sound, then relaxed, his focus remaining on Nora rather than slipping into memory. "Progress," she murmured, pressing a kiss to his palm. "Love," he corrected, drawing her closer. "The most powerful healing of all." As twilight enveloped Thornfield Abbey, the glass house glowed from within, a sanctuary of light and growth, created by two people who had found in each other the courage to believe in second chances and the possibility of joy after sorrow. In the years that followed, society would still whisper about the scarred Viscount and his unexpected marriage. But those who visited Thornfield saw something that confounded gossip, a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and deep affection. The feared Viscount was feared no longer, and his wife, once pitied as a victim of circumstance, was envied for the rare treasure she had found, a love that had transformed them both, not despite their wounds, but because of the strength it took to heal them together.